All right, I'm Meredith. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I work at Athletico in Uptown South. So I treat a lot of Howell athletes. So that's why I am very invested in you guys. So anyways, today we're going to talk about nutrition and why it's important. So first, just to cover the bases, anytime that we use words like training, exercise, performance, or competition, that pretty much means the same thing as practice, lifting, meets, games, matches, races, any of those things that apply to your sport. So you can kind of use those words interchangeably just for the purpose of this presentation. So first, what are macronutrients and why are they important? So macronutrients are those big important nutrients that we get from our food, those primary ones. The big ones are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. So carbohydrates are your first main fuel source, and then fats kind of fuel you for those lighter to moderate activities, and then protein is what helps repair and restore your muscle after breakdown. So we'll dive in a little bit more for each of those. So like I said, carbs are your body's first kind of source for energy. So anytime you're doing something that involves any kind of power or energy source, that's where your body's gonna go to first. So that's why it's really important to have a really good supply of that, because that's where your energy is going to come from. As soon as that source is depleted, you see immediate drop in energy levels and things like that. So you get fatigued. As you can see, it can lead to impaired focus, strength, endurance, and after all those things happen, you follow up with an increased risk for injury. So that's why that's really, really important. Some good sources of those of carbs are going to be whole grains, quinoa, brown rice, multigrain bread, those like whole foods, oats as well. And then your fruits are going to be really good, like fast-acting carbohydrates, so things that are your body's going to absorb really quickly. So those are good options for like right before practice, or 30 minutes to an hour before practice or a game, so that your body can use that really quickly. So those are really good options for that. And then vegetables also have a good number of carbohydrates that you can use for that as well as some yogurt, cottage cheese, and a couple other dairy things. Fats. So fats are kind of what I would call like the glue to all the other nutrients. So they're gonna help you absorb the other things that you're consuming as well. They also are really good with, important for regulating your hormones, making sure that your body temperature is regulated, which is important if you play a sport outside where it's really hot or where it's really cold. That's really important for that. It also helps protect your organs. And it's an energy source for when you're in that lower state. So when you're having to exert yourself, but it's not like super, super high intensity, that your fat sources kind of kick in as an energy source for that time as well. Some good sources of fats are going to be olive oil, avocados, nuts, peanut butter, or almond butter, whatever you prefer, and then fish as well. So again, some salad dressings, things like that are going to be good options to do that. And then protein, other than maintaining skin, nail, and hair health, also your bones, very important for that as well. This is the primary thing that we think of when we're thinking about building and repairing your muscle. So whenever we exercise, especially if we're doing any kind of resistance training, so like weightlifting and stuff, we have some degree of muscle breakdown. And so in order to repair and restore those muscles to get them bigger and stronger, protein is the source that our body uses for that. So that's why that's really important. Any lack of protein intake is going to lead to muscle wasting, meaning muscle loss, and then susceptibility to infection and fractures potentially. Those are in extreme cases, but still I think important to note. And then good sources of protein are going to be things like lean meat. So when I say lean meat, I mean meat that has a low fat content, because you're going to get more protein out of those per serving. So things like lean beef or chicken and turkey are both really good options as well. And then eggs, fish, and then some dairy products like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, those are things that have good protein options as well. All right, hydration. This is super, super important and I think underutilized across the board. So just 1% of fluid loss during exercise is shown to automatically start presenting itself as a decrease in performance. And so the higher that goes up, the more fluid loss you have during performance, the more your performance is going to suffer. So up to just 7% is when you start to see really extreme things happening, like fainting, heat stroke, those sorts of things, are only at 7%. So 1% is already a pretty big chunk of that. So that's why hydration is really, really important. And it's really also important to make sure that you're getting hydrated before performance so that you're going into it already fueled so that you're not having to do any catch up during and afterwards, or not as much catch up. So it's recommended that at least 16 ounces of water. I emphasize water. This doesn't mean soda, doesn't mean caffeine drink, doesn't mean a sports drink. It means water, because that's going to be the purest form of that. That's really going to fuel your cells. 2 hours before exercise, about 2 cups, 16 ounces, and then just before your exercise or your game or your practice, whatever, another 8 ounces, and then during performance or practice, making sure that you're getting at least another 4 ounces every 15 to 30 minutes, just kind of depending on how long you're practicing for, how much you're sweating, kind of what the environment is of your setting. So if it's really hot, probably a little bit more frequently, but you guys can kind of judge that on your own bodies. And then after exercise is also extremely important. So it's recommended that we get 16 ounces per pound of body weight loss. So you might not have heard this before, but during exercise, we actually, if you were to weigh yourself before exercise and then weigh yourself afterwards, a lot of the time we see immediate weight loss. Like that number on the scale is going to be different at the end of your practice, and that all is coming from water. Which is not a good thing. We don't want that to happen. That means that our body is having to play catch up on the water and the hydration. So immediately after exercise, it's important to get 16 ounces for every pound that you lost. So again, it's going to depend on your body composition, how much you're sweating, what your practice environment is, those sorts of things. So immediately afterwards is really important. And then this after practice fueling is going to be where I would recommend a sports drink, so something like a Gatorade or a Powerade that has electrolytes and those other kind of sodium things that are going to refuel those. Before, it's fine, but water is best, but then afterwards you want to make sure that you're refueling all of those things to make sure that those muscles are able to replenish using sodium and those sorts of things. So especially if your game or practice is lasting greater than 60 minutes, that's where we see the biggest deficit in those. So that would be a good option for post-exercise, making sure that your muscles are staying hydrated, okay? And then, so caffeine, love this topic. We all love it. We all like to drink it. And caffeine has been shown to give you a boost in athletic performance and alertness and mental focus, but too much of a good thing is not always good. So more caffeine does not mean better performance. Some can help, but too much is going to have the opposite effect. So anything over 300 milligrams is going to increase your risk of dehydration, and then too much caffeine is actually going to show a decrease in performance because, again, too much of a good thing isn't a good thing. So more doesn't equal better. So you're going to have to kind of find the balance. If you like drinking caffeine, it's not a necessity, but if you like to drink it and like the energy that it gives you, you're going to have to find the balance between, you know, what's enough that gives you some energy, but not too much that it's going to have those negative effects. So your blood caffeine peak is around 45 to 60 minutes before or after consumption. So if you're wanting that little spike of energy for your game or your practice, 45 minutes to 60 minutes before you play is going to be the best time to drink that caffeine. But I think it's important to recognize that caffeine beverage and water are not the same. So it's okay to have that caffeinated beverage before, but making sure that you're still hitting those water goals, because caffeine and water can have opposite effects. So we want to make sure that we're still hydrating properly as well. And then obviously everything has some side effects when you use it too often or too much. Some of the side effects of caffeine are poor sleep quality, so either not being able to fall asleep or waking up frequently throughout the night. Some anxiety increases, headaches, and then increased heart rate, and some gastrointestinal stress. So sometimes it can mess with your stomach. So again, you're just gonna have to, if it's something you wanna try, you're just gonna have to kind of find the right balance for you, not too much, but just enough kind of thing. And then fueling before your performance. So 3 to 4 hours before your game or practice is gonna be when you wanna have a fully balanced meal. So you wanna have a really good portion of carbs, and then a little bit smaller portion of protein, and then fat kind of sprinkled in the middle. So you wanna have something really complete. So having, you know, one item or 2 items of carbs, and for each of those categories is what's gonna be your complete meal, and that's what's best, you know, 3 to 4 hours before your workout, so your body can fully digest that before you're playing. And then 1 to 2 hours before you're gonna want to focus mainly on carbs, because again, those are those faster acting fuel sources. So something like pretzels or crackers, fruit's a really good one, something that your body can absorb quickly, because that's going to be your main energy source. So you want to have that readily available in the body right before you play. I think it's important to say that we don't want to treat performance just like a game. And I say that to mean that you want to fuel this way and properly for practices too. I don't know about you guys, but I know when I was playing competitive sports, my practices were sometimes more intense and more exhausting than the games were. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're fueling really well and being intentional about it for practices as well, because you're not going to play differently than you practice. So if you're fueling properly for your practice and you're performing well and making sure that your body is ready for those things, that's going to translate into games and those big, high intense, more pressure moments. And then obviously don't forget your water. So all of these things combined with that water, so 16 ounces, 2 hours before your game, and then right before as well. Really, really important. And then after performance, we want to make sure that we refuel those carbohydrate stores. So like I said, your body uses those carbs first, and so that's what we want to make sure we replenish right away. So right after your performance, having something small like fruits, any of those options are going to be good for refueling all of those carbohydrate stores that your body is using first. And then obviously we usually have some sort of muscle breakdown during performance and practice, especially with resistance training. So we want to make sure that we're refueling our protein sources as well, because your body uses that protein to rebuild those muscles. So we want to make sure that we hit those as well after 30 minutes is approximately the ideal time to replenish that protein. And then 16 ounces of water or a sports drink afterwards to make sure that you are refueling all of the hydration that you potentially lost during your workout. And that's it. There are my sources. The sports dietitian, and then the National Strength and Conditioning Association. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you. Are there any questions? Anything unclear that I can explain better, or anything like practically applicable to you guys that I can answer?
So sports drinks are bad?
No, they're not bad. There's just a better time for them. And I think it's afterwards when you sweat, you lose a lot of your sodium, and your muscles need sodium in order to contract, like to actually function. And so when you sweat, you lose a lot of that. That's why your skin is salty after you sweat a lot. And so sports drinks can help replenish that source, but we're not usually in a deficit of those things unless we've sweat a lot. So before a game isn't gonna be where you need that the most, it's gonna be afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Cool, that's where muscle cramps come from too. So not bad, but they're not all created equal either.